The stone floor is cool under your boots in an 1890s LEEDS dye house, damp with yesterday's rinsing water. Before the steam is raised, the vat room sits in a soft grey hush near the river Aire. You are the vat porter, first through the door, carrying a lantern, a chalk stub, and the day's small responsibilities. There are lids to settle, drains to check, buckets to turn upright, and hooks to feel for cracks. On the wall, the rules look oddly fussy at first. Never step over a hose, never rest a ladle on a vat rim, never lift a lid without tapping it first. But in this warm, wet room where wool, dye, steam, and tired hands must move together, fussiness has a purpose. A clean-looking floor may still be slick, and a misplaced ticket may send good cloth into the wrong shade. So you begin the round in the old order, slowly enough to notice what the room is trying to tell you. The lantern gives a small yellow circle, and inside it, the first trouble is already waiting. A rubber hose has been left across the near gangway, not coiled against the wall as the rule says it should be. It looks harmless in the dimness, just a dark line on darker stone, but by breakfast time men will carry wet wool here with both hands full. You stand for a moment, feeling the cool handle of the lantern in your palm, and choose not to walk round it. You set the lantern on the dry brick ledge, bend at the knees, and draw the hose back into its proper curve. The hose is heavier than it looks, full of yesterday's water, and it leaves a shining snake of damp behind it. That shining line matters, because the first foot that finds it quickly may slide before the mind has time to know. So you fetch a handful of spent sawdust from the corner box, scatter it lightly, and watch it darken where the water hides. The room tells its first little truth of the day. Clean stone is not always dry stone. In Leeds, in a woolen dye house close to the Aire, water is never only water. It carries soap from scouring, grease from wool, iron from pipes, coal dust from the yard, and the faint, loose colour of whatever passed before. A porter learns this not from a book, but from soles, cuffs, knuckles, and the slow memory of near misses. The rule sheet on the wall has been written in a clerk's firm hand, but its wisdom is older than ink. It comes from men who once stepped over something and wished they had not. It comes from cloth that once went into the wrong bath. It comes from a ladle that once slipped, rolled, struck a rim, and sent hot liquor over a boot. You move on. The first vat lid lies almost square, but not quite. Its iron handle points sideways, toward the wall, instead of outward into the walking path. That small wrong turn means something. A handle turned out tells the next man where the edge lies, where to grip, and whether the lid has been lately moved. A handle turned in makes the lid dumb. You lift the chalk stub and mark a little line on the slate near vat 1. Not a scolding mark, just a memory mark. Then you tap the lid twice with the back of your knuckle. The sound is low and wooden, with a hollow note underneath. No answering hiss comes from the seam, and no bead of warm damp gathers at the edge, so the vat has cooled as it should. Only then do you lift one corner. The smell rises slowly. Spent dye, wet wool, a little sourness, a little iron, a little coal smoke that has settled into everything. It is not a pretty smell, but it is a known one. In this room, known is often better than sweet. You lower the lid again gently and turn the handle outward. The porter's work is not to do the dyer's thinking for him. It is to make sure the dyer's thinking has a room fit to happen in. You check the drains next, beginning at the wall channel by the door. The channels are shallow grooves cut into the stone, patched over the years with brick and cement where carts, boots, and acids have worn them. Yesterday's rinsing water has carried threads into the grate. They lie there in a soft mat, red-brown in one corner, blue-grey in another, like bits of cloud pulled down to the floor. You crouch, take the little iron rake from its nail, and draw the wool waste free. A clogged drain is not a grand disaster at first. It is only a puddle, then a wet hem, then a porter stepping wide, then a man turning badly with a hook. The chain of trouble is made of small links. You break one link early, and no one later knows you did it. That is a quiet kind of success. By the back wall, the buckets are stacked mouth down, just as they ought to be. You turn each one upright, look inside, then turn it down again. One has a brown crust around the bottom seam. It may be nothing more than dried logwood liquor left from a dark shade the day before. Still, the rule says a bucket with old color in it must not be used for clean water. So you set it apart under the chalk mark for washing and draw a circle on its side. There is no anger in the motion, only sorting. One thing for rinsing, one thing for ash, one thing for color, one thing for the floor. The vat room works best when objects have the manners of steady people, staying where they are expected to stay. Outside, a cart passes along the yard, its iron tires making a slow crush over cinders. The sound comes through the high windows as a dull roll, then fades toward the gate. Leeds is waking beyond the walls. There are mills by the river, warehouses, scouring sheds, fulling mills, finishing rooms, and narrow streets where workers step out with tea still warm in their stomachs. But here, before the steam, time is small enough to fit inside the lantern light. You open the high window nearest the north wall. The sash is stiff with damp paint, and it moves upward one reluctant inch, then another. Cold air slides in over your face. It carries the river smell, not clean exactly, but moving, mineral, smoky, and alive. The dyers say a closed room makes a bad room before 8 o'clock. Steam needs a way to go. So does talk. So does the breath of hot vats when they first stir. You cross to the second window and feel the floor with the side of your boot before committing your weight. This is another habit that looks like fussing. Boot first, body second. A porter often walks where his eyes are not looking because his eyes are busy reading chalk, hooks, lids, cords, and rails. The foot becomes a kind of scout. Near Vat 3, the scout finds something gritty. You lower the lantern. A thin crescent of dried dye powder lies by the leg of a stool, dark as soot at the edge, purple where the damp has found it. It must have fallen from a paper packet or a spoon after yesterday's weighing. Some dye materials used in the trade have old names and old tempers. Logwood chips give deep blacks and blues when treated with the right metal salts. Madder and later alizarin made in chemical works can give reds that hold well in wool. Indigo has its own strange needs, being coaxed into a soluble form before the air wakes it blue again. The porter is not the color master, but he knows enough not to drag yesterday's stray color into today's pale vat. You sweep the powder with a damp rag, not a dry broom. A dry broom lifts dust. Dust travels. Dust lands where it pleases. A damp rag persuades it to stay. That is the sort of science a porter carries in his hands. Not laboratory science with polished glass, though Leeds had plenty of men who knew chemistry by the 1890s. This is floor science, bucket science, the science of what spreads, what stains, what slips and what waits. The second window opens more easily. With both sashes cracked, the grey inside the room begins to shift. Shapes become less like shadows and more like tools. There are long wooden poles resting on pegs, their ends darkened by years of wet work. There are iron cloth hooks, shaped for catching and lifting the heavy folded lengths known as pieces. There are ladles with deep bowls and handles polished smooth by palms. There are strainers, chalk slates, tin tickets on cords, and a white cup hanging from a nail by the rinsing trough. The cup is plain, chipped on one side, but it has its rule too. No porter is to judge rinse water by the trough alone. A trough can look clear when the bottom is dark and the light is poor. A white cup tells on color. It shows the faint blush of red, the tea stain of brown, the ghost of blue that water can hide in bulk. You touch the cup rim, as if greeting it. Not yet. Its time will come later. For now, the first round continues. At Vat 4, you find a ladle resting on the rim. It has been laid there across the edge like a bridge, perhaps by a tired man at closing, perhaps only for a moment, that became all night. The rule against that is painted on the wall in plain words. No ladle on vat rim. When spoken aloud, it sounds almost childish. But the bowl of the ladle has dried with a ring of color inside it, and its handle blocks the lid from sitting true. If steam were raised beneath a badly seated lid, the first lift might answer with a hot breath into a man's sleeve. And if the ladle rolled inward, it might knock cloth, scrape sediment, or vanish into liquor until someone had to fish for it. You take it away. The bowl clinks against the wash trough, a small bright sound in the dim room. You rinse it once, then again, and hang it on the third peg, bowl down. Bowl down means it drains. Handle left means it is ready for the right hand when standing at the vat. Even the direction of a handle saves a thought. Saved thoughts matter in a crowded room. When 6 men work among hot vats, every extra thought has to find space among noise, steam, orders, and the weight of wet wool. The porter's small arrangements give the mind fewer loose ends. By the time the dyers arrive, they should not have to wonder where the clean hooks are. They should not have to test each bucket. They should not have to ask whether a lid is safe to lift. They will have their own work, judging shade by eye, timing the turns, reading the cloth, and making decisions that cost money if wrong. You make the beginning plain. The wall clock above the inner door gives a dry click. 5:30, its face is fogged at the lower edge, and the minute hand trembles slightly before it settles. The steam man will soon open the line from the boiler house. Before that happens, you need the floor channels clear from the far vats, where the stone drops a little toward the riverside wall. You take the rake and lantern together. At the 5th drain, the grate lifts easily. At the 6th, it sticks. You do not force it. Another rule, unwritten but always present, says that anything stuck should be asked before it is commanded. You rock the grate once, then twice. A thread of wool has twisted around one lug, binding it like a soft rope. You work it free with the rake point, slow enough not to snap the rusted edge. The grate comes up. Under it sits a lump of blue fiber and soap curd, pressed into the corner. If left there, it would slow the first flush of hot wastewater. If the wastewater slowed, it would back along the groove, around the base of the vat, and out into the walking path. Then the one hose you moved earlier would not matter because the floor itself would become the hose. You scoop the lump into the ash bucket. The ash bucket is not for ash alone. In many workshops, names stay after uses widen. Here it takes damp sweepings, wool waste, paper, and the dark things no one wants underfoot. You set the grate back with its bars aligning to the flow. The fit is not perfect. Nothing in the room is perfect. The old stone has settled. The wooden lids have swollen and shrunk over many winters. The iron hooks have lost their first shapes. But the room knows its work. It has been corrected by hands each morning until correction has become part of the furniture. You pass the dye store's door and pause. It is locked. The key is with the master dyer, as it should be. A porter may carry prepared liquor and fetch water, but the weighed colours are not to be left to guesses. By the 1890s, Leeds dye houses had 1 foot in old craft and 1 foot in modern chemical trade. Some colours came from long familiar stuffs, bark, roots, insects, woods, and minerals. Others came from coal tar chemistry, packed in tins and papers with printed labels from chemical makers. The new dyes could be strong, clear, and useful. They could also be unforgiving when measured badly. A little too much might make a shade harsh. A little too little might leave a merchant squinting at the cloth by daylight, saying it was not what he ordered. So the store stays locked. The porter's trust is not proved by having every key. It is proved by knowing which keys are not his. At the slate board, you rub away yesterday's final chalk with a damp thumb. Not all of it goes. Old chalk leaves pale ghosts, names half lost, numbers softened into smears. You do not mind the ghosts, so long as today's marks stand clear. You write the date in the corner, the day and month as you were taught, then leave room for the dyer's batch numbers. Your handwriting is plain. It does not need beauty. It needs to survive steam until dinner. A tin ticket hangs from a cord beside the board. You lift it and feel its stamped edge. Tin tickets are small things, but they carry cloth through confusion. A piece may come from scouring with merchant initials, length marks, or a sewn thread. Yet once wet and folded, one dark length can look much like another. The ticket says what the eye may forget. You hang the ticket back on its nail, not quite flat against the board, but tilted so it can be lifted quickly by cold fingers. The cord is rough hemp, darkened near the knot by years of wet handling. A bad cord is a small weakness, but small weaknesses like to meet one another in busy rooms. So you rub it between thumb and finger, feeling for fray, and decide it will last the morning. If it had felt soft or broken inside, you would have changed it before the first piece came in. A ticket lost from cloth is not merely a lost label. It is a question let loose in steam. The dyer can sometimes answer such a question by shade, length, merchant mark, or memory. But memory is tired by noon, and shade is still only a promise before the vat has done its work. You move from the board to the long rail, where wet hooks hang in pairs. Each hook has a handle worn smooth where hands close around it. The iron curves are not all alike, though a stranger might think they were. One is better for lifting a folded piece from a deep vat. One catches the selvage edge more neatly. One has a slight twist, and belongs only to rough work where it cannot tear a fine face. You take each hook down, turn it in the lantern light, and look along its curve. A crack near the bend can hide under rust and old color. A burr on the tip can snag cloth and pull a thread. The porter does not mend iron in the vat room, but he decides what iron may enter the day. One hook has a raised edge, no bigger than a grain of barley. You feel it before you see it. It catches the skin of your thumb, not sharply, but enough. That is enough for wool. You set the hook aside on the lower shelf, under the chalk mark for the smith. No speech is needed. The hook has been found out. The rest go back in pairs, points inward, handles outward. The same way every morning. This makes the rail readable at a glance. Full pair, missing pair, clean pair, suspect pair. A dye house is full of words, but many of its best instructions are not spoken. They are made by the angle of a handle. They are made by a bucket turned mouth down. They are made by a wet pole laid across two pegs instead of leaning where it may slide. You take the long pole from its resting place and feel its weight. It is ash wood, or something close to it, pale where it was once new, blackened now by water and dye. The end is rounded from work. It has pressed cloth under liquor, guided folds, lifted weight, and knocked softly against vat sides for more years than anyone has counted. You turn it once in both hands. A pole with a splinter is not a tool. It is a thorn waiting for steam to hide it. Your palm passes over the shaft. There is a raised place near the middle, but it is smooth, swollen by water rather than broken. It will serve. You set it back on its pegs. Thick end to the left, narrow end to the right. That is how the dyer likes it. That is how your hands will seek it later without needing your eyes. Outside the window, the yard has grown a little lighter. The grey has lifted from the paving stones, and the shape of the boiler house chimney begins to show. A man coughs somewhere beyond the door. Another answers with the scrape of a shovel. Coal is being drawn toward the furnace. Soon the room will change. The still air will begin to move upward. The lids will dampen at the seams. The pipes under the floor will knock once, then settle into their low working murmur. Before that, you make your last quiet circuit. Vat 1, lid settled, handle outward. Vat 2, drain clear. Vat 3, floor wiped and sawdust down. Vat 4, ladle removed. Vat 5, grate free. Vat 6, channel open. The order is familiar enough that you could say it in the dark. Perhaps you have. Winter mornings in Leeds can make a room feel as though it has no edges. Fog comes off the river, smoke sinks low, and the first hour belongs more to touch than sight. On such mornings, the rule sheet is less a command than a kindness. It tells you where to begin when the room is not yet visible. It tells you what to trust, not the shine of the floor, not the apparent cleanness of water, not the quick path across a busy room. Trust the round, trust the mark, Trust the object put back where the next hand expects it. You hear the boilerman's valve before you see any steam. It starts as a small iron complaint under the floor, a sound like a pipe clearing its throat. Then comes the slow ticking of warming metal. The vat room listens with you. A bead of water gathers on the cold underside of one pipe and falls to the stone. Another follows. The day is beginning to find its heat. You step to the high window and open it another inch. Cold air comes in, and the first low breath of steam rises to meet it. The two airs mix above the vats, one pale, one warmer, making soft veils in the grey light. The master dyer arrives without hurry, but not late. He is a narrow man in a dark waistcoat, with a notebook wrapped in oilcloth under one arm. His cuffs are already turned back. He nods to you, then to the room, as though the room is another worker who has come on time. You give him the slate. He reads the chalk marks, the circle on the bucket, the note by Vat 1, the hook set aside for the smith. His eyes pause on each thing only briefly. That is the point. A good mark should not require a story. It should say enough, and then let the morning continue. He unlocks the dye store and opens the door just wide enough to enter. Inside, the shelves hold tins, packets, jars, and covered crocks, each with its own promise and its own caution. You do not follow. You stand outside with the porter's patience, hearing paper shift and a spoon touch the lip of a jar. The dyer comes back with a small tin of prepared color, a notebook entry already marked with his finger. "Dark blue today," he says quietly. "2 pieces first, then 3 if the shade holds." The words are ordinary, but they set the room in motion. Dark blue means heat, timing, careful turns, and rinsing that cannot be guessed by the top of the trough. Dark blue means the white cup will earn its nail. A younger hand comes in behind him, still buttoning his coat, hair damp from the morning. His name is Tom, though older men call most young hands by their first names, as if surnames must be earned in steam. He is new enough to look at the vats as objects, not yet as a moving map. He sees spaces where you see paths. He sees shortcuts where you see crossings. For now he is told to fetch the ash bucket and stand ready at vat 2. He does it quickly. Too quickly, perhaps. You watch the way his boots choose the floor. The master dyer reads from the notebook, and you take down the first tin ticket. The stamp number is rubbed by age, but it is still clear enough. You hang it on the waiting peg beside the slate and prepare the sample cups. The cups are not fine things. They are small, tin, handled, dented near the lip, and washed many times with water that never quite leaves them bright. One will carry a little dye liquor for the dyer to judge strength. One will take rinse water later. One may hold a spoonful of spent bath if a question comes. You set them in their row, mouths up, handles toward the room. A porter who makes tools easy to take has already saved time no one will thank him for. The first cloth arrives from the scouring side before 6. It comes folded over a carrying bar, damp from washing, smelling of soap, wet wool, and the faint sheep grease that hot water never fully removes. 2 men bring it in, shoulders lowered under the weight. Dry woolen cloth can look manageable. Wet woolen cloth tells the truth. It sags. It holds water like a field holds rain. It pulls downward with a quiet stubbornness that has to be respected. You take the near end, not to show strength but to guide the fold away from the stone. The dyer checks the selvage mark. The merchant's initials are stitched in a corner, dark thread on darker cloth. You raise the tin ticket and compare it with the list. The number agrees. The initials agree. The length mark agrees. Only then do you move the cloth towards vat 2. The room is not crowded yet, but it is ready to become so. Steam lifts from the warming water. Boots leave dark shapes on the stone. The windows begin to cloud at their lower panes. The one-way path through the vat room now becomes more than a habit. It is the shape of the morning. From the scouring door, men enter along the left gangway. They pass vat 1, then vat 2, then turn at the far rail. They leave by the right side, toward the rinsing troughs and the finishing passage. Even if a man's errand is only to cross the room, the path asks him to follow the circle. It is not the shortest way, it is the way that keeps bodies facing the same general turn. When men carry wet cloth, their arms are not free to argue with another man's shoulder. When steam lowers over the floor, a man may see only the next pair of boots. So the room has been taught to move like a slow wheel. You take your place at the near side of vat 2. The dyer lifts the lid just enough to see the surface. You have tapped it already, but he taps it again. No one minds. A repeated safety is not an insult in a vat room. Hot water lies below, darkening as the prepared color meets it. The dyer stirs with a shorter pole, drawing the liquor from edge to center. The surface folds over itself. Black at first, then blue, then something between ink and evening. You hold the cloth hook ready. The first piece must go in without twisting, because a twist can make one part take color differently from another. The dyer gives the nod. You and the two carriers lower the fold. Not drop, lower. The cloth kisses the surface, darkens, and begins to sink. Steam comes up around your wrists. Warm damp fills your sleeves. You guide the edge with the hook, feeling for tension. The wall resists, then gives, then settles under the liquor. The dyer counts softly. 1, 2, 3. At 6, you press the pole down. At 10, the farman lifts. At 12, the cloth rolls inward, slow and heavy, like something sleeping being turned in bed. The first turn is always a conversation. Too much force, and the fold fights back. Too little, and one edge floats. You listen through the pole. Wood carries the answer up into your hands. The dyer watches the surface, not your face. He has the look of a man reading weather in a bowl of dark water. For a while the room holds together. The first piece is moving, the second waits near the rail. The bucket with old color has been set apart. The cracked hook is out of use. The drains are open. The porter's round has become the room's first good luck, though luck is only another name for work done early. Then Tom takes the short way. It is no grand mistake. He has been told to fetch a clean cup from the rack by the rinsing trough. The rack is only across the room. He sees a clear gap between vat 3 and vat 4. No one is in it at that second. So he steps across the middle, one hand out, quick as any young man asked to hurry. You see him from the corner of your eye. At the same moment, the far carrier shifts backward with the waiting second piece. He cannot see Tom. The cloth on his shoulder blocks his view, and steam has thickened around the vat. Tom is not in danger of some great storybook calamity. He is simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, which is how most workshop trouble begins. You set your pole into the rest, step out, and touch his sleeve. Not hard, just enough. This way, you say. He looks surprised, then a little embarrassed. You point him back along the left gangway, the long way round past vat 1. He wants to say it is slower. You can see the thought before it reaches his mouth. So you give him the reason before pride asks for it. Wet wool makes a man wide, you tell him. Steam makes him blind. And a hook in the hand makes him slower to stop. Tom glances toward the carrier, who is now turning with the folded piece. The path he crossed is no longer empty. The space is closed like water behind a boat. You let him see that for himself. Then you say, one way round. Always. He nods, not fully convinced, but less certain than before. That is enough for a morning lesson. A rule rarely becomes real the first time it is heard. It becomes real when a young hand sees the shape of the trouble it prevented. Tom walks the long way to the rack. He passes behind the dyer, around the waiting cloth, and back along the proper side with the cup in hand. It has taken more steps. It has saved more than steps can count. The dyer says nothing, but his eyes move once toward you. The count resumes. The first piece turns again. The liquor takes on a fuller blue, thicker in the eye, as if depth had been added to water. A cart arrives in the yard with a sharp clatter, then stops outside the office door. Voices come faintly through the wall. A clerk's voice. A merchant's man, perhaps. Paper. Boots. The faint hurry of people not standing over hot dye. The master dyer hears it too. He does not move faster. That is one of his gifts. A dye house can be pushed from outside by orders, promises, delivery carts, and men in good coats. But color does not care about a clerk's watch. Wool takes heat in its own time. Liquor penetrates folds at its own pace. Rinse water clears when loose dye has actually left, not when someone wishes it had. Still, the outside world enters. The inner door opens, and the foreman comes in with his hat still on. Rush order from the cloth merchant in Brigade, he says. Dark blue to be ready for finishing as soon as may be. The dyer lifts the sample cup from the edge and studies the liquor. As soon as may be, he repeats, there is no mockery in it, only caution. The foreman looks at the vat, the steam, the cloth half turned beneath the surface. He knows enough not to demand magic. But he also knows carts, invoices, customers, and the sharp language of misdelivery. He says the finishing room is to be warned. Then he leaves. The door shuts. The room seems a little smaller after him. A rush order does not make the vat boil faster, but it changes how men stand. Shoulders rise, steps shorten, hands reach before eyes have finished looking. That is when the one-way path matters most. You take the chalk and mark the rush batch on the slate with a small cross beside the number. Not a cross of alarm, a cross of attention. The dyer sees it and nods. The second piece is brought forward. Tom is sent to carry the ash bucket to the far side. He begins to turn across the middle, remembers, stops, and follows the long path. That small correction is quiet enough that no one praises it. But you notice. A room improves one remembered step at a time. The morning thickens into work. Steam beads on eyebrows. Sleeves darken at the cuffs. Boots leave overlapping prints, all curving in the same direction. Left gangway to far rail to right side to trough. The path draws itself on the floor in damp arcs. Men begin to follow the marks their own feet have made. A strange thing happens then. The rule that seems slow begins to feel smooth. No one has to ask which way to pass. No one meets another man chest to chest with cloth between them. The poles swing in known arcs. The hooks are carried points down along the outer side. The sample cups travel on the inner shelf, never across a vat mouth. The room becomes less like a crowd and more like a clock with warm gears. Not a perfect clock, a human one. It coughs, sweats, pauses, and mutters. But it keeps a kind of time. You carry a cup of liquor to the window light for the dyer. The cup is hot through the handle, so you wrap a rag around it. At the window, the blue looks different. Near the vat, under steam and soot-dark rafters, it seemed almost black. In the pale northern light, a red cast shows at the edge. The dyer takes the cup from you, tilts it, and lets the liquid climb the tin side. He watches the thin film. Color is judged thick and thin, deep and shallow, in motion and at rest. He adds a small correction from a prepared bottle, no more than a measured spoonful. You do not ask what it is. The dyer has his knowledge, and you have yours, but you know what follows any correction. More stirring, more time, more need for the cloth to move evenly through the bath. The rush order waits inside that spoonful. The spoonful disappears into the vat with no show at all. It makes only a darker swirl, then a small fold in the surface, then nothing a stranger could name. But the dyer has seen it enter. You have seen it enter. And now the whole bath must be made one color again, edge to edge, top to bottom, before the cloth can be trusted to take it evenly. You take the long pole from its pegs, and Tom takes the shorter stirring staff from the rail. The dyer points with 2 fingers, not speaking, and you begin the slow pull along the near side. The pole moves through the liquor with a thick, padded feel, as if the water has grown a soft weight of its own. You draw it toward you, turn your wrists, and send the moving water back under the sunken folds. Tom watches the motion and copies it a little too sharply. The surface breaks around his staff. You shake your head once, gently, not chopping, you tell him. Turning, he loosens his shoulders. The next stroke is better. The room is listening again to count and motion. The cloth rises a hand's breadth, then sinks. A blue edge appears, slick and dark, before the liquor closes above it. The dyer lowers the sample cup, lifts a little from the middle, and carries it toward the window. This time he does not tilt it at once. He waits for the faint shaking of his hand to stop. Judging color is partly eye, partly memory, and partly the habit of not letting other people's hurry enter your fingers. At the window, the blue looks less red than before, not finished, but nearer. He gives the cup back to you, and you carry it to the side shelf, following the one-way turn even though the direct path is open. Tom sees you do it. That is useful. A rule has more force when the older hand obeys it while no one is watching. The second piece is ready now, lying over the bar with its ends kept clear of the floor. Wet cloth has a way of finding dirt if given even a moment. It can drag a black thread, a coal speck, a smear of old color, or one rough grain of grit into the bath. So you hold the lower fold with your hook, keeping it lifted just above the stone. The two carriers breathe through their noses and wait for the dyer's nod. They have learned not to enter a vat before the bath is ready for them. In some work, waiting looks like idleness. In a dye house, waiting can be the part that saves the cloth. The nod comes. The second piece moves forward along the proper path. One man steps, the next follows, and the bar stays level between them. The cloth lowers. Steam wraps around the men's hands. The first edge touches. You guide the fold under with the hook, pressing gently, letting the weight of the wet wool help itself downward. Tom stands at the far side, holding his staff ready, eyes fixed on the cloth, as though it might leap away. It will not leap. It will only drift, twist, settle badly, and punish anyone who thought it harmless. The dyer begins the count. You hear his voice under the murmur of the pipes. 1, 2, 3. At 4, the far carrier shifts his foot. At 5, Tom almost steps back against the rail. At 6, you say, steady. The word is not loud. It is enough. At 8, the cloth has sunk. At 10, you press. At 12, Tom lifts. The fold rolls, not cleanly, but well enough. The dyer watches the surface and gives no correction. That is praise in its plainest form. The morning grows warmer around you. The high windows, opened early, are now clouded at their lower edges, while their upper panes show a pale slice of lead sky. Beyond them, roofs and chimneys sit in damp light. Inside, every sound has softened. Boots no longer strike the floor sharply, because the stone is wet enough to hush them. Buckets knock dully. Hooks scrape with a low iron whisper. The steam line gives a mild tremble beneath your feet, like something breathing through the floor. You carry the used sample cup to the wash trough and rinse it 3 times. Once is not enough for dark blue. Twice may look enough. 3 times leaves no argument. The first rinse comes away strong. The second is grey-blue. The third is nearly clear, though nearly is a word a porter treats with care. You hold the cup against the white tile near the trough. A faint stain clings to the lower seam, so you rinse it again. Tom, passing with the ash bucket, slows to watch. Cups too, he says. Cups too, you answer. Anything that carries color can carry mistake. He nods, and this time the nod is smaller, less embarrassed. Learning in a dye house does not arrive as a lesson with a beginning and an end. It comes in scraps. A hose, a path, a cup, a handle turned outward, a ticket kept tied. By mid-morning, the rush order has become a rhythm rather than a surprise. The foreman's message still hangs in the room, but it no longer flutters. The first 2 pieces are under control. The third is being checked. The dyer has marked his book with the time the cloth entered the bath, the correction added, and the first sample judged. His pencil is worn short. His notebook smells faintly of oilcloth, damp paper, and the dye store. You glance at the slate. The chalk marks are beginning to shine at their edges where steam has touched them. A dry mark is sharp and white. A damp mark grows soft and thick, and if left too long, it becomes more cloud than word. This is why the porter rewrites Not because the chalk cares, because men come later and need the same certainty the first man had. You take the chalk stub, wipe the slate with the side of your hand where old steam has gathered, and trace over the rush batch number. The little cross beside it holds. The tin ticket for the first piece hangs from its nail. The second ticket hangs beside it. The cords are separated, not tangled, and the stamped faces turn outward. You have set them that way for a reason. A ticket hanging face to the wall may as well be a closed eye. The scouring room door opens again, and two more men bring in folded cloth. Their aprons are damp to the chest. One has soap bubbles dried white along his sleeve. They bring the cloth with the slow irritation of men who have already moved it once and know they will have to move it again. The first piece is meant for the third dark blue bath. The second is said to wait for a later shade. Said is not enough. You wipe your fingers on your apron and take the first ticket from the carrier. It is wet. The stamp number shows, but the chalk mark on the back has blurred into a pale oval. The carrier says it came from the middle rack. You ask, which middle rack? He frowns. There are many middles in a mill. Middle rack near the scouring tubs. Middle rack by the north wall. Middle rack between the hot wash and the squeeze rolls. The porter's rule says no cloth enters on a place name alone. Place names travel badly from one room to another. Numbers travel better if they remain dry enough to speak. You bring the ticket to the slate and compare it with the dyer's list. The first two digits seem right. The last one might be a 3 or an 8 worn flat by wet fingers. You do not guess. Guessing is a shortcut taken inside the mind. It is no better than walking across the middle of the room with a cloth hook in your hand. You hold the ticket under the window. The light gives little help. Steam has settled on the tin, and the stamp has filled with grime. You rub it with a dry rag. The number sharpens a little, but not enough. The dyer turns from the vat and sees you still holding it. That pause tells him something is wrong. He says, "Not yet." The carriers lower the cloth back onto the bar. No one is pleased. A stopped lift is troublesome. A wrong lift is worse. You ask for the selvage. One carrier turns the corner of the cloth outward, and you look for the woven edge mark. Some merchants have initials stitched in thread. Some have ink marks that fade when washed. Some rely on paper, twine, and hope. This one has small dark stitches at the edge. They have swollen in the wash, and the letters are hard to read. The dyer comes close, wiping his hands on a rag. He reads the list from his notebook. Hargreaves and Son, dark blue, 2 pieces urgent. 1 piece to follow if same handle. The initials on the cloth might be H and S. They might also be H and B if the second stitch has loosened. Tom leans in too far. You touch his elbow and move him back. Too many heads over wet cloth bring drips, shadows, and confusion. The second ticket, still hanging from the wrong rail perhaps, becomes the next question. The carrier says there was another cord tied above the scouring squeeze. You send Tom for it by the one-way path. He goes quickly, but properly. The room waits. Waiting has a sound. The steam keeps breathing. The vat keeps murmuring. Men shift weight from one boot to the other. Somewhere in the yard a horse stamps. The dyer does not return to stirring, because if this is the wrong piece, no motion in the vat will solve the problem. Tom returns with a second tin ticket, cord dark with water. This one is clearer. Its stamped number belongs to the later shade, not the rush blue. The cord has been tied to the rail from which the first cloth was taken. That is the kind of mistake the old rule was made for. Never carry 2 loose tickets at once. Never tie a ticket to a rail, unless the cloth beneath it is the cloth it names. Never let a wet cord drift from one bar to another. Written out, these rules sound excessive. In the room with 2 folded pieces of similar woolen cloth and steam softening every mark, they sound like common sense spoken late. You compare the 2 tickets again. The smudged one, by process of absence, is likely the rush order. Likely is still not enough. You ask the carrier to count folds. He exhales through his teeth, but he does it. The folded cloth is lifted edge by edge, not opened fully, only counted by its turns over the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The dyer checks his list. 6 folds for the urgent piece. The later shade was marked 5, being shorter by several yards. Now the cloth speaks with more than one voice. Ticket, initials, fold count, merchant list. Together they make a steadier answer. The dyer says, "This one." You tie the correct ticket to the waiting nail beside the slate, then take the wrong ticket from Tom and hang it on the separate rail marked later. You do not leave it in his hand. A young hand holding an unplaced ticket is a question looking for a pocket. The carriers lift the rush piece again. Because the lift has been delayed, the cloth has cooled slightly in the doorway air. That is not nothing. Wool enters hot liquor differently when it carries less warmth from scouring. A cooler fold may slow the first taking of color. If one side warms before the other, shade can begin unevenly, especially in a bath already corrected once. The dyer knows it. You know it. But the cloth cannot be returned to the scouring room simply to recover the lost minutes. So the next part must be done more carefully. The dyer tells you to open the fold a little wider before lowering, not open fully. Just ease the tucked edge. You slide the hook under the fold and lift. The wool pulls heavily against the iron. Water drips onto the stone in dark spots. Tom stands opposite, pole held ready. This time his eyes flick once toward the path behind him before he sets his feet. That is good. A man who checks his space is becoming useful. The cloth is brought to vat 2. The surface has been stirred again, and the color looks settled. The dyer dips the sample cup, studies the film at the rim, and gives a small downward motion of his hand. The carriers lower. You guide. Tom waits for the count. The first edge touches the liquor, and the cooler cloth seems to pause on the surface. It does not sink as willingly as the earlier piece. You press with the pole, but lightly. The rule says a floating fold is not to be bullied. If forced down too hard, it can trap air beneath itself, holding a pale crease where color meets cloth too late. So you coax it. Press. Release. Press again. Let the liquor enter. Let the fold grow heavy. The dyer counts slower than before. The carriers hear the change and adjust. At 12, the cloth turns, but one corner rises. Tom starts to push it down. You say, "Wait." The corner floats for 1 breath, 2 breaths, then darkens as liquor runs over it. Only then do you guide it under. The dyer's face stays still. That is not comfort exactly. It is concentration. Outside the room, the rush order is a promise to a merchant. Inside the vat, it is a series of small allowances. A cooler cloth, a delayed ticket, a corrected bath, a young hand learning not to cross. None of these would make a fine story in a newspaper. All of them can be seen later in the cloth if handled badly. The turn continues. The surface blue becomes deeper, more even, but the dyer still watches the near fold. He asks for a lift at the edge. You and Tom set poles beneath the cloth and raise a narrow portion just above the surface. The wool comes up shining black-blue, heavy and smooth. For a moment, before the liquor runs off, it reflects the high window. Then the color settles into itself. The dyer bends close, not touching. He looks where the fold had floated. No pale line shows. He nods once. You lower the cloth back. The men breathe again, though no one had quite noticed holding still. The delay has cost time. The saved mistake has saved more. That is the strange arithmetic of a porter's work. 5 minutes spent checking a ticket can protect a whole morning. 10 minutes lost in turning can spare a merchant's complaint, a re-dye, or a length sold as second quality. But the arithmetic is never written neatly. It is felt in the shoulders of men who must now work the later vats closer together. It is heard in the foreman's step when he comes to the door and sees the slate. He asks, "Behind." The dyer says, "Ticket wrong from scouring." The foreman looks at you. You hold up the smudged tin. He takes in the blurred number, the retied cord, the mark on the slate. His mouth tightens, then relaxes. Better here than in the vat, he says. That is all. He leaves. It is enough. The room returns to its slow wheel. Tom carries the later shade ticket to the proper rail, and this time he reads the number aloud before hanging it. You answer with the number from the slate. The old porters call this call and return. Some mills do it for lengths, some for bales, some for die batches, some only when trouble has already taught them. A number spoken and answered has less chance to wander. It is not ceremony, it is offence. You rewrite the smudged rush ticket number on the slate while the tin dries near the window ledge. Chalk squeaks faintly under your hand. The slate has a groove worn along its lower edge where many hands have gripped it. You think of all the batches that have passed across this board: black broadcloth, blue serge, brown woolen pieces for coats, deep mourning shades, military shades when contracts came, merchant shades described in words that could mean different things under different skies. In the 1890s, Leeds is a city of cloth, iron, smoke, water, and counting. Counting yards, counting pieces, counting minutes in the vat, counting pence in wages, counting how many times a cloth has been turned, because the eye cannot watch all things at once. You write plainly, no flourish, no curve that could be mistaken for another number when wet. The porter's handwriting is part of the machinery. By late morning, the first piece is ready for a higher lift, not out. Not yet, only raised enough for the dyer to judge whether the color has entered evenly. You set the hook under the fold, with Tom opposite. The dyer gives the count. Lift on 6. You bend your knees, not your back. Wet cloth teaches the body honesty. A man who tries to lift with pride will feel it by evening. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You lift together. The cloth rises, heavy as sodden earth. Blue liquor streams from it in sheets, then ropes, then drops. For a moment, it hangs above the vat like a dark curtain, its surface uneven with folds. The dyer looks along the breadth. He is searching for streaks, bars, clouding places where the liquor has not reached the same way twice. The color is not yet final. Wet wool lies. Steam lies a little, indoor light lies more. But an experienced eye can see the direction of the truth. He tells you to lower, you lower. No splash. A splash wastes heat, stains the rim, and startles men into quick movements. The cloth settles back under. The dyer marks the time. Then he turns toward the third piece. This one must be watched, he says. You glance at the third folded length, resting on the bar, and notice how its lower edge hangs colder than the others. It has waited too long in the moving air between rooms. The delay has not ruined it, but it has changed the way it must be handled. Wet wool carries its own weather. A warm piece enters the vat softly, taking heat and color in a more even way. A cooler piece pauses, floats, tightens slightly, and asks the bath to do more work. The dyer sees this before anyone says it. He moves his thumb along the edge of his notebook, then looks toward the steam pipe feeding the coil beneath the vat. There is no sharp command in his face, only the quiet calculation of a man who knows that timing has already bent. You set one hand on the vat rim, not to lean but to feel the heat through the damp wood. The near side is warmer. The far side is slower to rise. That can happen when a coil has taken heat unevenly, or when the first work of the morning has drawn more warmth from one side. A vat is not a perfect bowl of sameness. It has corners of motion, places where liquor travels strongly, and places where it waits. The rule in such a moment is not to hurry the cloth into obedience. The rule is to make the vat one again before the wool is asked to trust it. You take the long pole from its pegs, feeling the familiar swelling of the wood under your wet palm. Tom watches your hands, then takes the shorter pole without being told. That is another small change in him. Earlier he had waited for words. Now he is beginning to read the room. The dyer points first to the warm side, then to the far edge, showing where the liquor must be drawn through. You place the pole into the bath, slowly, so the surface opens rather than breaks. The blue closes around the wood. It looks almost black where it is deep. Near the window, a high, pale reflection trembles on the moving skin of the liquor. You pull along the near side, then push the movement under the folded cloth already working below. Tom mirrors you on the far side. His first stroke is cautious. His second is smoother. The dyer stands between you, listening more than looking, because a stirred vat has its own sound. A thin splash means carelessness. A heavy slap means the pole has struck cloth. A low rolling murmur means the liquor is moving through itself. You settle into that murmur, pull, turn, wait, push, let the blue water return. The room seems to lean inward around the vat. The carriers rest the third piece on the bar, shoulders lowered, arms loose but ready. They know the weight will come back to them soon. The foreman does not enter, but his hurry remains outside the door like a draught. It touches the room without being seen. The dyer lifts a sample cup, dips from the far side, and carries it toward the window. He tilts it slowly, watching the thin film climb the tin. At the lip, the blue is lighter than the sample taken from the near side. Not much. Enough. He brings the cup back, and you already know what he will ask. More turning. Not more heat at once. Not more color. First, motion. In a dye house, adding is easy compared with making even. A spoonful can disappear in a second, but its effect must be carried by water, heat, and time. The dyer makes no correction yet. He wants the vat to speak more clearly before he changes its answer. You and Tom work the poles again. The long rule for this is old and spoken in different words by different men. Do not chase a bad patch with strength. Bring the whole bath round to meet it. That is what you do. You draw the warmed liquor toward the cooler side. You fold motion beneath the surface. You keep the pole from striking the hidden cloth. The earlier pieces lie below like great, dark, sleeping animals. You must move the liquor around them without dragging them out of place. It is patient work, and it asks the shoulders for steadiness rather than force. The dyer waits through a full, slow count before sampling again. This time he takes from the middle, then from the far edge, then from the near. He sets the 3 cups in a row on the shelf. To a stranger, they would look the same. To him, the first has a warmer cast, the second a thinner edge, and the third sits between them. He adds nothing. He only nods toward the third piece. Now. The carriers bend beneath the bar. You take your place at the near fold, hook angled downward, wrist loose. Tom stands opposite, feet set along the proper path, leaving space behind him for a man to pass. The dyer raises one hand. No one speaks over him. The first edge of the third piece is lifted from the bar and guided toward the vat. Water drips from it in a slow line, marking the stone. Those drops will have to be sawdusted later. For now, they show where the cloth has been. The edge touches the surface. It floats. It darkens along the contact line, blue spreading into grey wool with a softness that looks almost gentle. But the gentleness is deceptive. Once color begins to enter wool, the work has crossed a small threshold. It may be deepened, adjusted, and sometimes corrected, but it cannot be made untouched again. The dyer's hand lowers. You press the cloth just enough for liquor to pass over the fold. Tom does not push too soon. He has remembered the floating corner from before. The cloth accepts more of the bath. It grows heavier. A small fold of trapped air rises as bubbles, breaks at the surface and vanishes. The dyer begins the count. 1, 2, 3. His voice is quiet, but it holds the room. At 4, you slide the hook beneath the near edge. At 5, Tom sets his pole under the far fold. At 6, the carriers loosen their grip a little, letting weight pass into the liquor. At 7, you press down. At 8, Tom lifts. At 9, the fold rolls inward, thick and slow. At 10, one edge hesitates near the cooler side. You feel it before you see it, a small drag through the pole. Not wrong, not yet right. At 11, you wait. At 12, the dyer says, "Hold." Everyone holds. The cloth remains half-turned, submerged but not settled, with one heavy fold leaning against the current. This is a moment when a young hand might try to finish the turn with one strong shove. Tom's shoulders tense. You hear it in the little shift of his boots. You say, "Easy." The word is low and close to the vat. It gives him something to do besides hurry. The dyer dips the pole beside the fold, not touching the cloth, only testing the pull of the liquor. Then he says, "By count." That means the turn will be made with voices and shared time, not with each man guessing. You set your hands. Tom sets his. The carriers take the weight of the bar again. The dyer counts more slowly now. 1, 2, 3. On 3, you lift only an inch. On 4, Tom draws his pole back. On 5, the carrier nearest you lowers the bar. On 6, the far carrier steps half a pace along the path. The cloth rolls, not quickly, not with a splash. It folds into the liquor as if the vat has finally remembered how to receive it. A ribbon of darker blue rises from below and spreads across the surface. The dyer watches the color settle. His mouth does not change, but his fingers, holding the sample cup, relax slightly. That is enough to tell you the turn has been saved. The third piece is under. The bath is still uneven at the edges, but no pale fold has been trapped. The work can continue. The rule of slow count has done what strength could not have done. It has made several men into one careful motion. That is part of the porter's place in the room. You are not the master dyer, and the final shade is not yours to name. But when wet cloth is moving, your count, your pole, and your feet become part of the color. The dyer marks the time in his book. He writes small, tight figures, keeping the page shielded from steam with his sleeve. You take the slate and add a chalk line beside the third piece, showing its delayed lowering. The mark is not blame. It is memory for later. If the shade looks different in finishing, the ledger must know where to look back. Industrial work often seems loud from outside. From inside, much of it is remembering what happened when no one had time to explain. The third piece turns again after a few minutes. The count is still slow. The dyer asks for no talking during the first rounds, and the men obey without complaint. Words can sit lightly in a room, but they can also pull attention away at the wrong second. Steam thickens over the vat and drifts toward the open windows. It meets the cold pane and becomes water again. Small drops gather along the glass, swell, and run downward through the soot. Each drop leaves a clean, narrow trail. Beyond the window, Leeds continues in its own fogged movement. Cartwheels, hooves, a whistle far off, the smoke of morning fires lying low over roofs and yards. Inside, your world is the width of the vat and the count of the turn. The dyer samples after the third turn. This time he lifts not from the surface, but from deeper down, using the ladle with the long handle. He carries the sample to the window. You see the color touch the inside of the tin, a wet blue almost like nightfall. He tips a thread of liquor back and watches it run. Color in a cup can be misleading, especially with dark shades. A deep liquor may look powerful and still take unevenly if the wool has not opened to it. A weaker liquor may finish truer if heat and motion are right. This is why the dyer watches the cloth more than the cup. He asks for a small edge lift. You and Tom find the near fold with the poles. The cloth comes up slowly, heavy and shining. Blue runs off in long streams. The lifted edge is only a hand's breadth above the surface, but it shows enough. The place that floated earlier has taken color. It is not finished. It is not yet the blue the merchant wants, but it has not failed at the start. The dyer says, "Down." You lower. The cloth sinks. The surface closes over it. A rush order has a way of making men think in whole pieces. Ready or not ready, good or spoiled, ahead or behind. But the actual work happens in smaller states. Warming, opening, taking, turning, settling, holding, rinsing. Each state has its rule, and each rule protects the next. By late morning, the dye house has become fully awake. The boiler line murmurs with a steady undertone. The floor carries warmth through the soles of your boots. The smell has deepened from cold, damp wool to hot fiber, dye liquor, coal smoke, and wet wood. Your apron is dark at the front. Your cuffs cling to your wrists. Chalk dust has made a pale patch on one knuckle. You notice these things without stopping for them. A porter's body keeps its own small ledger, where the sleeve is wet, where the palm is sore, where the boot slips if turned too sharply, where the shoulder will ache if the next lift is made badly. The noon bell is not yet ringing, but the day has reached its middle in the work itself. The first piece is nearly ready to come up for judgment. The dyer has taken enough samples to know the direction of the shade. He wants the cloth lifted higher, not out into the air, just high enough to see more breadth. You clear the path before the lift. That comes first. No bucket near the right side, no loose cord on the stone, no cup on the rim, no ladle resting where a sleeve may strike it. You move each thing to its place with quick, quiet motions. Tom sees you and begins to move the ash bucket from the path before you ask. He sets it too near the rail. You point. He moves it another foot. That foot matters. Wet wool swings wider than dry eyes expect. The carriers take their positions. The dyer stands where the window light will fall across the lifted cloth. You take the near pole. Tom takes the far. The count begins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Lift. The cloth rises out of the vat, and the whole room seems to lower its voice. Water sheets down from the length in a dark blue curtain. Steam climbs from the cloth in rolling white breath. The wool hangs heavy, its folds stretching under their own weight. You can see where the face of the cloth catches light, and where the folds keep it. The dyer leans close. He looks along the length, then across the width. He is looking for bars. Bars are unwanted lines of difference, where cloth has taken color unevenly across its breadth. He is looking for clouds, softer patches where the shade has not settled true. He is looking for the memory of every turn. The first piece is good enough to keep moving, not finished in the final sense. No dyed cloth is finished until washed, wrung, dried, raised, sheared if needed, pressed, and seen again under proper light. But the vat has done its part so far. The dyer says, lower and hold. The cloth returns to the blue. The second piece follows. Its lift is heavier, because it has taken more liquor into its folds. Tom grunts once, then steadies himself. No one comments. A small sound under weight is no shame. The shame is in pretending weight is not weight and moving badly because of it. The second piece also holds. Then comes the third. The room knows this one is the question. The delayed cloth, the cooler fold, the ticket that nearly sent it elsewhere, the bath that had to be turned into itself before lowering. You feel the pole settle under it. Tom's eyes meet yours across the steam, not for reassurance exactly, but for timing. The dyer gives the count. You lift. The third piece rises, slower than the others. Liquor streams from the lower fold, pattering back into the vat. At first, everything looks dark. Then the window catches the place near the edge. The dyer raises his hand for stillness. The cloth hangs. A faint difference shows along one line. Not a pale streak, not a failure, but a question. The dyer steps closer. He does not touch the cloth. Touch can mark wet wool, and a dry finger can lie about shade. He bends, waits for the steam to pass, and looks again. The line is there, then less there. Wet shine can make a ridge look lighter. A fold can throw its own shadow. The dyer asks for the cloth to be shifted half a hand's breadth. You and Tom adjust, careful not to twist. The light changes. The line softens. The dyer lets out a slow breath through his nose. Another turn, he says. No more than that. You lower the cloth. The decision is small but full. One more turn may even the doubtful line. Too many turns may overwork the piece or deepen it beyond the match. The dyer is balancing a scale no one else can see. You take your place for the extra turn. The room has grown warm enough that sweat and steam are no longer easy to tell apart. Tom wipes his forehead with the back of his wrist, leaving a faint blue mark near his hair. He does not notice. You notice because porters notice what color touches. He will carry that mark until wash time. The dyer counts the extra turn more slowly than before. You let the cloth roll under the liquor, guiding the questionable fold through the moving bath. This is not dramatic work. It is exact in a plain way. Wood against wool. Water around weight. Men breathing together. At the end of the turn, the cloth settles differently, and the surface grows still. The dyer waits longer than usual before sampling. Waiting after motion lets the liquor stop telling false stories. When he samples again, he takes from beside the fold, then from the middle. The 2 cups go to the window. He studies them, then sets them down. No correction. That means he will trust the turn. The first irreversible part of the day has passed quietly. The wool has taken the dark blue. What happens now can improve, cleanse, and finish it. But it cannot return the cloth to the morning's grey. That is the strange gravity of dyeing. A piece enters the vat as promise. It leaves as evidence. Every rule before this moment existed to protect that crossing. The one-way path. The tin ticket. The slow count. The clean cup. The open drain. The lid handle turned outward before dawn. They are all present in the cloth, though no buyer will see them. At noon, a bell rings somewhere beyond the dye house, dull through walls and steam. It does not empty the room. The vat cannot be left simply because a bell has spoken. Men take their food in turns when work permits. A porter often eats standing or sitting on an upturned crate near the cooler wall, where the steam is less thick. Today, you take only a little bread and cheese from a cloth wrap. The bread is firm at the edges. The cheese has warmed in your pocket and smells sharper than it did at dawn. You eat with one hand clean enough for eating and keep the other mind on the vat. Tom sits on the lower step near the scouring door, holding his tin mug in both hands. Tea steam rises into dye house steam and becomes part of the same air. He says little. That is common after a morning of correction. A young man learns as much from being stopped as from being told. You do not fill the silence with instruction. The room is still teaching. The dyer eats nothing yet. He stands with his notebook tucked under one arm, watching the surface as if lunch can wait inside his pocket. The first piece has gone beyond the most uncertain part, but it still needs heat, motion, and a little patience. You finish the last corner of bread, fold the cloth wrap and set it on the dry shelf above the chalk. The shelf is not truly dry, only drier than the rest of the room, which is enough for bread and paper. The noon light comes through the high windows in a flat, pale band, and the steam makes it seem thicker. Tom drinks from his mug, slowly now, not gulping as he might have done before the morning taught him caution. The carriers lean near the wall, shoulders rounded, letting their hands hang loose. No one has clean hands in a dye house by noon. Even when the skin looks pale, color sits under the nails, in the creases, and along the cuffs. The dyer asks for the first lift again, not high, only enough to judge the taking of the shade. You wipe your palms on the rough front of your apron, then take the pole in both hands. The wood feels warm where it has rested near the vat. It also feels slick, and you shift your grip until your fingers find the old worn place. Tom rises without being told. He sets his mug on the lower ledge, away from the walking path, and comes to the far side. That small placement would not have happened at dawn. A mug in the wrong place can become a stumble, and a stumble near wet cloth becomes everyone's problem. The dyer looks once at the mug, sees it safely set aside, and returns his attention to the vat. The count begins again, quiet and even. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You lift with your legs and keep your back soft, as the older men taught you years before. The cloth rises, and the blue water runs from it in shining ropes. There is no clean blue yet. Wet cloth in a vat room is always darker than it will appear after rinsing and drying. Still, the shade has a character now, a weight, a depth, a direction. The dyer moves along the lifted breadth, looking for the faint line that had troubled him. The line has softened. It has not vanished completely, but it no longer stands apart like a seam. He asks you to shift the cloth toward the window, half a hand only. You and Tom adjust the poles together, careful to keep the lift even. A twist at this moment could make a false mark, and then no one would know whether the cloth or the light was lying. The dyer waits for the steam to clear. The lifted wool gives off a warm smell, deeper than sheep grease, mixed now with the mineral bite of the dye bath. He nods, but only once. That means the vat may continue. It does not mean the piece is beyond question. You lower the cloth, letting the weight return to the liquor slowly, and the surface closes above it. The first two pieces can be held in the bath a little longer. The third must be watched at its edge. The dyer marks the times in his notebook, then asks you for the temperature at the near side. You do not use a fine instrument for this first answer. You lay your palm near the rim, where the damp wood carries the heat upward. A porter's hand is not a thermometer, but it is a familiar instrument all the same. You know the difference between a vat waking, a vat working, and a vat running too hard. The near side is steady. The far side feels a little cooler through the pole when you stir. You tell him so. He sends Tom to bring the small metal thermometer from the nail beside the dye store door. Thermometers in dye houses of this period are practical things, not delicate museum objects. They are kept in wooden or metal guards because a bare glass stem would not last long among hooks and wet poles. Tom brings it along the proper path, holding it carefully, as if carrying a narrow bottle of sleep. The dyer lowers it into the far side, waits, and lifts it to the light. He reads the mark, frowns a little, and lowers it again at the near side. The difference is small. Small differences are the kind that matter in a dye house. A boiling kettle and a cold pail are easy to understand. A few degrees across one vat can hide inside ordinary steam and still change how wool takes color. The dyer does not open the steam harder. He asks for a slow turning of the bath without lifting the cloth. That choice tells you the problem is not heat alone. It is distribution. Heat held in one side of the liquor must be carried through the whole vat before the cloth can trust it. You take the long pole again, and Tom takes the short one. The carriers step back, glad for a moment without weight. You draw the liquor under the submerged cloth, feeling the resistance change as the hidden folds move slightly. The dyer watches the surface for signs of roughness. A vat can be stirred badly even when no cloth shows above it. If the pole presses too hard, it may drag a fold and make a crease that later appears as a dull place. If it stirs only the top, the bottom remains its own country. So the motion must go down, through, and around. You set the pole deep, then lift just enough to pull the liquor beneath the cloth. Tom works opposite you, slower now, and his strokes no longer chop the surface. The dyer lets this continue longer than comfort would choose. The room seems to breathe in time with the poles. Pull, settle, draw, wait. The rush order from Brigade becomes quiet inside this movement. No paper promise can enter the liquor and do the work for it. The dyer takes another reading with the guarded thermometer. Near side, far side, middle. This time the difference is narrower. He does not smile, but he closes the notebook and tucks it under his arm. That means the vat may be trusted for the next stage. You take the white cup from its nail and rinse it before use, though it has not yet been used today for final rinsing. The rule says a cup must be made ready before the cloth is ready. If you wait until the lift begins, your hands will already be full. The cup is chipped on the left side, and your thumb finds that chip without looking. You rinse it once in clean water, twice, then hold it against the pale tile. No blue shows. Later, when rinse water is tested, this cup will tell the truth more plainly than the trough. For now, it waits near the rinsing side, handle turned outward. The first piece is ready to come out of the dye bath. Not finished. Never finished at the first lift, only ready to leave one kind of work and enter another. You clear the right path again, because wet-dyed wool must move in a steady line from vat to trough. No one steps backward blindly. No one crosses through the middle. No one sets down a hook where the cloth will swing. You scatter a little sawdust on the darker wet marks left by the third piece earlier. Sawdust drinks what the floor keeps hidden. It also gives boots a soft roughness when the stone grows too slick. Tom brings the carrying bar, and this time he checks both ends before setting it across the supports. One end is slightly rough. You see his fingers stop there. He turns the bar, putting the smoother side where the cloth will pass. You say nothing. The silence lets him keep the discovery as his own. The dyer gives the word. The carriers move in. You and Tom guide the first piece upward, bringing it to the surface in a long, heavy fold. Blue liquor falls back in sheets, and the vat answers with a steady patter. The cloth smells hot and deep, like wet winter coats, iron water, and something woody from the dye. The carriers take the weight onto the bar. Their shoulders lower together. You guide the near edge with the hook, keeping it away from the rim. A rim may look smooth, but old wood holds grit, crust, and dried color. A dyed face dragged over such a place can pick up a mark after all the careful turning has been done. The first piece clears the vat. It hangs from the bar, dark and streaming. The room makes space for it. Men step with the one-way turn, all moving toward the rinsing side, no one cutting across. You walk beside the lower fold, hook beneath it, lifting just enough to keep it from brushing the stone. The weight of the wet cloth travels through the air like a slow animal. It has no patience with haste. At the trough, the carriers lower the bar into its rests. The trough water is already running, not strongly, but in a steady flow from the clean side to the drain side. In many dye houses, rinse water was as much a tool as any pole or hook. Too little water leaves loose color in the cloth. Too much sudden force can drive folds hard against each other or waste heat and time. The rule is to begin steady, then judge. You take the white cup and dip it at the outflow. The water comes up blue, as expected, strong enough that the chipped cup looks almost enameled. No one would wring cloth on that first running. Even a clerk in a clean collar could see it is too full of loose color. You tip the cup into the drain channel and dip again after the cloth has been turned once in the trough. Still blue. Not the deep blue of the vat, but a smoky wash that clings to the white cup. The finishing room sends a boy to the doorway. He is small, cap too large, cheeks red from running between warm rooms and cold passages. Foreman says, "How long for first blue?" he calls. The dyer does not answer at once. He is watching the rinse, and a vat man dislikes answering a clock when water has not finished speaking. You answer gently when the cup clears enough. The boy looks at the cup, then at the dark trough, and understands only part of it. He nods and runs back. Tom watches him go. He says, "They'll be waiting." You say, "They may wait cleaner than they can clean a stain." It is a plain sentence. It lands better than a lecture. The first piece turns in the rinse. The carriers use shorter poles now, guiding the cloth through the moving water. You loosen one fold with the hook, letting trapped dye run out from inside. A dark cloud slips from the fold and is taken by the drainward flow. This is why the rule forbids hurrying the rinse. A cloth can look washed on the outside while color still hides in the heart of the fold. If wrung too early, that hidden color can press back through the cloth in streaks. It can also stain the rollers. And once rollers are stained, the next cloth may carry another piece's ghost. You dip the white cup again. The water is lighter, but still shows blue at the bottom curve. You hold it near the window, and the dyer glances over. "Not yet," he says. The words are expected. You pour the cup away. The second piece is now ready to leave the vat, but the first occupies the trough. This is where the morning's delay begins to pay its price. The work cannot simply pile up. Wet dyed cloth cannot be left hanging too long, cooling unevenly, while the next stage waits. Nor can a rinse be shortened because another piece is ready behind it. The room tightens, not in panic, but in careful sequence. The dyer decides the second piece will be held in the vat through one gentle turn while the first rinse continues. He writes that hold in the notebook. That mark matters. If the second piece later appears deeper than the first, the added hold must be remembered. A ledger is not only a book of successes, it is a book of causes. You return to the vat and help give the second piece its holding turn. The liquor is less powerful now, having given much of itself to the cloth, but it still has heat, motion, and enough color to deepen a shade if time stretches. The dyer watches closely. He does not want the second piece to outrun the first. Matching pieces in one merchant's order is not simply dyeing each one well, it is dyeing them well together. Tom stands at the far side, and his face shows the first real weariness of the day. His morning eagerness has softened into concentration. He is not slower in a bad way. He is less wasteful. That is often how a worker becomes useful, not by moving faster, but by spending fewer motions. Back at the rinse trough, the first piece releases another cloud when turned. The color is paler now. The water in the trough looks almost clear from above, but the white cup says otherwise. You dip at the outflow, lift and hold it against the tile. A faint blue crescent sits at the lower curve. It would be easy to call that clean enough. It would be especially easy with a boy running messages, a foreman waiting, and finishing rollers ready in the next room. But the rule says the cup decides, not the wish. You change the water flow, opening the inlet a little more. The sound of the trough shifts from a soft run to a brighter spill. The cloth stirs in the moving water. Loose color threads away. This extra flow costs water and minutes. In a city like Leeds, water was abundant in one sense and costly in another. Mills needed it for scouring, dyeing, rinsing, steam, and cleaning. The river carried industry, and industry returned much to the river that a modern eye would not forgive. Yet inside the dye house, every pail and channel still had to be managed. Wastewater could not be allowed to flood the floor, choke the drains, or carry color into the wrong place. You check the channel below the trough. The morning grate you cleared is taking the flow well. Blue water runs along the groove, broken by scraps of wool and little islands of sawdust. You pull a clump away with the iron rake before it reaches the grate. The clump is soft, dark, and harmless only if removed now. A clogged drain during rinsing would spread colored water under the men's boots. Then every step could become a stamp of blue where no blue was wanted. You toss the clump into the ash bucket. Tom sees you return the rake to its nail, teeth downward, handle to the left. He does not yet know every reason for every placement, but he is beginning to see that a tool put back wrong is not truly put back. The first piece is turned again. You dip the cup. The water is nearly clear. Nearly has become a familiar word today, and you treat it with the same caution as before. You wait one more turn. The carriers would rather move on. Their shoulders say so. The finishing room would rather receive the cloth. The foreman would rather have the message that all is proceeding, but the runoff carries the final vote. After the next turn, you dip from the outflow, not the middle. The cup comes up pale, only the faintest blue whisper at the bottom. You carry it to the dyer. He takes it, holds it toward the window, and tilts it until the water thins along the chipped side. He says, "Ring after one more flow." That is not immediate permission. It is permission after a condition. You nod, set the cup back, and open the inlet for a final clean pass through the fold. The water runs. The cloth shifts. The last loose color loosens further and travels toward the drain. Only then do you call for the ringing rollers to be readied. The rollers are in the adjoining space, set in a sturdy frame, darkened by use and damp. They are not the later electric machines of another century. They are turned by belt, shafting, or hand arrangement depending on the works, and always watched closely. Their job is simple to say and exact to do. They press water from the cloth, but they must not pull it crooked, crease it harshly, or accept cloth still giving off dye. Rollers remember color. A little loose blue on their surface may find the pale piece that comes after. This is why the porter's cup protects rooms beyond his own. A boy from finishing returns. He says the tenter room can take the first piece when run. The tenter room is where cloth will later be stretched to width and dried, held by hooks or clips along frames. By the 1890s, some finishing processes had changed with machines and heated rooms, but the old need remained the same. Cloth must dry in shape, not in whatever twist wet weight gives it. You tell the boy the first piece is coming after the last flow. He waits this time, not running off at once. Perhaps he wants to see what the cup has said. Perhaps he is only catching his breath. You dip the cup for him to see. The water is pale enough now that the white china shows through. Not pure, not like rain, but clear enough for this stage. The dyer nods. The first piece is lifted from the trough. It rises heavier than it entered because rinsing water fills it differently from dye liquor. Water streams from every fold, bright now rather than dark. The carriers guide it toward the rollers, and you walk the lower edge with your hook. No one cuts the corner. The floor has grown wetter, and the one-way path matters again. At the rollers, the cloth must be fed evenly. One edge entering ahead of the other can skew the piece, pulling a crease into it. The roller man stands ready, sleeves high, hands open. He asks if the water runs. You answer, "Cup cleared." That is enough. The dyer stands beside the frame, watching the first feed. The cloth enters slowly. The rollers grip, water presses out in a clear sheet, then a falling run into the tray below. You look at that runoff as carefully as you looked at the cup. If the pressed water suddenly blooms blue, the rinse has lied. It does not. A faint tint appears, then passes. The roller man keeps the turn steady. The cloth comes through flatter, darker in wet shine, but less burdened by water. It is gathered onto the waiting bar, not piled on the floor. Nothing wet and dyed is to be left in a heap unless creasing is intended, and here it is not. The boy from finishing takes his message and goes. The first piece has moved on. The room has not caught up. The second piece is now pressing against its allowed hold time. The dyer returns to the vat with a quicker step, though still not a hurried one. There is a difference. Quickness can be clean. Hurry makes dirt. You and Tom lift the second piece. The cloth comes up with a heavier pull than the first, because it has waited in the warm liquor longer than planned. Blue water runs back in thick ropes, and the dyer watches the falling streams for any sign that the shade has gone too far. You feel the weight through the pole, down into your wrists, then into your knees, where the old habit of lifting properly keeps the strain from settling in your back. Tom lifts opposite you, quieter now, and his face has the set look of someone counting without moving his lips. The dyer asks for the breath to be held higher, toward the dull window light. You and Tom raise together, inch by inch, until the upper fold clears the rim and hangs like a wet blue curtain. The color looks deep, perhaps a little deeper than the first piece, but wet cloth always speaks in a lowered voice. The dyer narrows his eyes and waits for the steam to pass. Waiting is part of seeing. A man who looks too quickly sees the steam, the shine, the fold, and his own worry all mixed together. The dyer shifts his position half a step so the light falls across the cloth instead of along it. There the shade shows more plainly. It is close, not exact in the way a printed label promises exactness, but close in the way wool, water, heat, and handwork can be close. He says, "Trough." The word releases the room. The carriers take the bar, shoulders down, hands spaced evenly, and the second piece begins its slow journey toward rinsing. You walk beside the low fold, hook under the edge, keeping it clear of the wet stone. The path is busier now because the first piece has only just left for finishing, and the trough side still carries the puddles of its passing. Tom starts to take the inside turn, then checks himself and moves wide along the wall. That correction saves him from crossing the lower edge of the cloth, where one swinging fold could brush his coat and carry a streak of dye away from the piece. Small things travel, a drop on a sleeve, a thread on a boot, a ticket in the wrong hand, a cup rinsed once instead of twice. In the trough, the second piece is lowered into running water, and the first bloom of loose blue rolls out from the folds. It is stronger than the first piece gave at the same stage. That tells the dyer what the extra hold has done. It has not spoiled the cloth, but it has given the rinse more work. You dip the white cup at the outflow. The water comes up blue enough that the chipped edge disappears behind color. The dyer sees it and says nothing, because the cup has already spoken clearly. Tom stands with his pole resting against the trough side, and you move it to the pegs before it can slip. He glances down, then nods. A resting pole is never only resting if it can fall. You open the inlet a little more than before, but not so much that the cloth batters itself against the trough end. The water brightens in sound, running through the channel with a stronger note. The second piece turns, and a darker cloud releases from a tucked fold near the middle. You catch the edge with the hook and loosen it. The cloud opens like ink in a basin, then thins as the flow carries it toward the drain. This is why the porter watches folds, not just water. The trough can run clear at the top while a pocket of color sleeps inside the cloth. A pocket found by the ringing rollers wakes too late. Then it presses out under force, and what might have been rinsed gently becomes a mark. The dyer sends Tom to check whether the roller tray is clean after the first piece. Tom goes by the outer path, past the ash bucket, past the chalk slate, past the rail where the later shade ticket hangs alone. He returns with the answer, tray clear, roller man wiping. The dyer nods, then looks again at the cup in your hand. You tip the blue water away and dip again, still strong. Not as strong as before, but strong enough to leave a blue curve where the cup is deepest. The foreman appears at the doorway, hat in hand now, perhaps because the heat of the room has taught him manners. He asks whether the second will be ready soon. The dyer looks at the trough. You hold up the cup. The foreman sees the color inside it, and whatever sentence he had prepared changes shape in his mouth. He says the merchant's man has asked twice. The dyer answers, he may ask a third time, but he cannot take wet dye out with talk. There is no sharpness in it, only the plain boundary between an office promise and a rinsing trough. The foreman looks at you then, perhaps because porters are often where delay becomes visible. You say, the first cleared clean, and this one is carrying more loose color. That is a careful sentence. It gives the cause without blaming the earlier ticket delay, and it gives the rule without hiding behind it. The foreman nods once, not happily, but with understanding. He says he will tell finishing to hold the frame space. Then he leaves, and the room becomes smaller and calmer again. The second piece turns in the trough. The water lightens. You test again. A pale blue remains, stubborn at the bottom of the cup. The carriers look toward the rollers. The roller man looks toward the dyer. The dyer looks toward the cup. No one looks toward the clock. That is how the rule against hurry holds the room. It gives every man a single thing to trust when waiting is uncomfortable. The cup is not wise. It is only white. But a white cup in a dark room can be wiser than a tired eye. You let another flow pass through the cloth. The drain channel runs well. Those small blue threads gather near the grate. You take the rake and clear them before they can mat together. The motion is quick, but not rushed. Rake down, draw back, lift, drop into the ash bucket, return the rake, teeth down. A porter learns to finish each small act fully, because unfinished acts become tomorrow's snags. Tom watches the grate, then watches the cup. He asks if clear means no color at all. You tell him no, not in this room, and not with dark blue. Clear enough means the water no longer carries loose dye that can travel where it is not wanted. That is a useful difference. Workshops are full of such differences. Dry enough, hot enough, clean enough, strong enough, safe enough. Each one sounds uncertain until a man has seen what happens on both sides of it. The dyer takes the cup from you and holds it to the window. A trace remains, but it is faint, more shadow than color. He turns the cup, letting the water run thin over the chipped side. Then he says, one more turn, then rollers. The carriers seem to relax at once, because a condition with an end is easier than waiting without a shape. You give the cloth its final turn in the trough. Tom draws the far fold open gently, and this time he finds a hidden pocket before you point it out. A small dark thread of color slips free. He watches it go with a look that is almost private. That is how the rule becomes his. Not because you said it, because he saw what would have been carried forward. After the final flow, the cup comes up pale. The dyer approves. The second piece is lifted, streaming bright water, and guided to the rollers. You walk the edge again, the hook raising the low fold just above the stone. The floor beneath the path is wet enough now that the sawdust has become a dark paste under many boots. It still gives grip. It still marks the safe way. At the rollers, the feed is slower than before. The second piece has to be watched for extra color in the runoff. The roller man sets the pressure carefully, and the cloth enters with both edges even. Water presses out into the tray. At first, it shows a stronger blue than the first piece did. The dyer's eyes move from tray to cloth to roller face. The color thins. It does not bloom. That means the rinse has held. The cloth comes through flatter, dripping less, and is gathered onto its bar. The boy from finishing returns, sees the second piece ready, and disappears again with the quick feet of someone carrying good news down a damp passage. Now the third piece waits. The third piece is the one with the question in its edge. It has been held with care, turned with care, and watched more closely than any cloth likes to be watched. The dyer does not ask for it out at once. He asks for a lift first, high enough to judge the questionable fold again. You take your place. Tom takes his. The carriers come in slower now, because the day has entered their shoulders. The count begins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Lift. The third piece rises from the vat with a thick sound, as if the liquor is reluctant to release it. Blue runs from the folds, and steam rolls upward, hiding the cloth for a moment. You hold steady until the white veil thins. The dyer steps toward the window light. The line is still faintly there. It is not pale exactly. It is not a stripe. It is a slight difference in the way the wet surface receives light, along the place where the cooler fold had first resisted the bath. The dyer asks for the cloth to be held still. Holding still under weight is harder than lifting for a moment. The body wants to shift, to bargain, to move the burden into another muscle. You let your knees carry it. Tom breathes through his nose, eyes fixed on the dyer. The dyer waits. He changes his own angle, not the cloth's, and looks again. Then he asks for a narrow edge to be lowered and raised once more through the liquor. Not a full turn, only a wash through the doubtful place. This is a delicate decision. Too much work may deepen the edge, too little may leave the line. You and Tom lower that part only by a hand's breadth and let the liquor pass over it. The cloth darkens as it enters, then shines as it returns. The line softens. The dyer gives the smallest nod. Trough, he says. The third piece leaves the vat. No one celebrates it. In a dye house, a difficult cloth moving to rinse is not victory. It is the next responsibility. The carriers take the bar, you keep the lower fold lifted, and Tom clears the path ahead, moving the ash bucket, the empty sample cup, and a loose coil of cord that has slipped from the ticket rail. He does it without being asked. The room has changed him. In one day, though not completely. No room changes a man completely by tea time, but it can give him a better way to stand. The third piece enters the trough, and the water takes a darker cast at once. You expected that. The extra attention in the vat has left more loose color to rinse away. The white cup comes up heavily blue. The foreman will not like it. The finishing room will not like it. The merchant's man, somewhere beyond the warm walls, will not know what to like until the cloth is dry. So the cup remains the honest companion. You open the inlet to a firm but steady flow. The cloth shifts in the trough, broad and dark, and the first release of color runs towards the drain. Tom stands ready with the hook. He looks at you before touching the fold. You nod. He lifts the tucked edge gently, enough to let water into the heart of it. A dark plume comes out. He does not force it wider. That is good. Wet wool can be persuaded, but it remembers rough handling. The dyer returns to his notebook and writes the third piece's extra edge wash, the delayed lowering, and the longer rinse now beginning. His pencil leaves soft marks on damp paper. The oilcloth cover has protected the book through many days, but the pages still swell slightly at the corners. A dye house ledger is never as clean as an office ledger. It carries the room in its fibers. Steam, finger marks, color dust, the pressure of hurried writing. You take the cup again after the second turn. Blue remains, rich and plain. You pour it away. The drain channel carries the water, but not as freely as before. The extra flow from 3 rinses has brought wool waste down from the trough side, and a small mat is forming near the lower bend. You see the water slow around it. This is another porter's moment. No one calls it out, no one asks for it. But if left alone, the mat will thicken and the blue water will spread back across the floor. You set the cup on its nail, take the rake, and crouch by the channel. The floor is warm through the damp. Your knees feel the stone. The wool mat comes away in pieces, each one soft, slippery, and tinted dark blue. You drop them into the ash bucket. The channel clears, and the water quickens with a small sucking sound at the grate. Tom glances over from the trough. You point with the rake to the channel, then to the floor. He sees the line of water lowering. Another lesson not spoken fully. Flow is a tool. A drain is not finished just because it is open at dawn. It has to remain open while the day's work passes through it. The third piece turns again. The blue in the cup grows lighter, but slowly. The dyer looks toward the doorway before the foreman appears, as if he has heard impatience before it has feet. Sure enough, the foreman steps in. He says the merchant's man is waiting in the office and wants to see a sample. The dyer shakes his head. Not from the trough, he says. The foreman knows this, but pressure makes men ask questions they already understand. A sample from wet, unrinsed, steaming cloth would tell a poor truth. It might look too dark, too bright, too uneven, or better than it truly is. The dyer says the first piece can be seen after it has rested through the first finishing check. The foreman says that may be too late for the man's patience. The dyer looks back at the trough. Then let his patience dry with the cloth, he says quietly. Again, it is not sarcasm. It is craft speaking to commerce in the only language it has. You dip the cup and show the foreman the remaining blue. He looks at it, then at the third piece. The room smells strongly now of hot dye, rinsing water, coal smoke, wet wool, and the sour edge of spent liquor cooling in the vat. It is not an office smell. It is the smell of reasons. The foreman leaves. The third rinse continues. The carriers are tired, so the dyer changes the rhythm. Shorter turns, longer flows between them. This spares the men's shoulders without cheating the cloth. It is one of those adjustments that comes from watching both material and bodies. A rule is not a wooden board nailed across the day. It is more like a handrail. It gives the day something to lean on, while still allowing each step to be taken as it comes. Tom wipes his blue-marked forehead again, making the stain broader. You almost tell him, then let it be. He will see it later, in some washroom glass or dark window, and perhaps he will remember the third piece. The cup lightens after another flow. Still not ready. You turn the cloth again, loosening the same doubtful fold, and this time the water that leaves it is only slightly darker than the trough. The line inside the cloth is giving up its hidden color. That is promising. The dyer asks for the cup. You hand it over. He tilts it, studies the pale blue at the bottom, and sets it on the shelf. He does not speak. Silence can be a measurement too. One more flow passes. The channel remains clear. The rollers are ready. The finishing boy does not return, perhaps because the foreman has learned that asking every few minutes does not pull color from wool. At last, the cup shows only a faint blue smoke. The dyer gives permission for the rollers after one final turn. The carriers lift the cloth from the trough. It is heavy, but the water that falls from it is brighter now, not thick with dye. You walk the lower fold, hook steady, boots careful on the dark paste of sawdust and water. At the rollers, the dyer stands closer than before. This piece needs watching at the tray. The roller man adjusts the feed. The cloth enters. Water presses out, blue at first, then pale. Everyone watches the tray, not the cloth. A bloom of dark color would mean the doubtful fold still held loose dye. No bloom comes, only a faint, steady tint, thinning as the cloth passes through. The dyer's face softens by a degree. The third piece has not yet proven itself fully, but it has passed the next gate. It is gathered onto the bar and sent toward finishing. The rush order has moved beyond the vat room, but the vat room is not free of it. It has left behind wet floors, tinted drains, used cups, darkened troughs, warm rollers, stained rags, and a ledger full of small causes. The afternoon light has shifted while you worked. It comes through the high windows lower and duller, carrying more smoke from the yard. The steam looks different in that light, less white, more grey. The first hard part of the day is over, and the second quieter part begins. Cleaning after colour is not the end of work. It is work that keeps the next colour from inheriting the last one. You return to the vat. The dye bath is spent, or nearly so, its strength given mostly to the cloth. Its surface is darker at the edges, with small bits of fibre clinging where the liquor has fallen and risen. The dyer samples it once, not for the merchant now, but for the record. He notes the spent shade, the hold time, and the rinse delay. Then he tells you to draw down the levels slowly. Slowly matters. A vat emptied too quickly can carry sediment hard into the drain, clogging the channel or leaving a dark line along the stone. A slower draw lets heavier matter settle where it can be strained and removed. You open the lower valve by degrees. The old handle resists, then gives. Warm spent liquor begins to move through the pipe, and the drain channel answers with a deeper run. You watch the floor near the pipe joint. No leak shows. Tom stands nearby with the ash bucket and the strainer basket. The basket is made of metal mesh, bent slightly at one corner, and blackened from many days of catching fibre, chips, and grainy sediment. You set the strainer beneath the run, and the first warm rush strikes it with a soft metallic hiss. The basket trembles in Tom's hands, not from danger, but from the steady push of water and spent dye. Fibres gather at once, blue-black curls of wool softened by heat, folding against the mesh like wet leaves. You tell him to tilt the basket slightly so the liquor can pass through without climbing the sides. He adjusts his wrists and the flow steadies. That is another small rule, rarely written, because it belongs to the hand more than the wall. A strainer held flat becomes a plug. A strainer held wisely becomes a gate. The spent liquor runs thinner as the vat lowers, changing from dark blue to a dull, smoky grey. At the bottom, the last water carries the heavier things, grain, fibre, and the tired residue of the bath. You close the valve before the pipe begins to suck air, because a coughing pipe can spit back along the joint. Tom looks at the handle, then at you, as if storing the movement somewhere for tomorrow. You let the last liquid settle in the bottom of the vat, where it can be wiped and rinsed rather than driven into the drain. The dyer comes with his notebook and bends over the lowered vat without putting his sleeve on the rim. He looks at the stain line, the small clinging fibres, and the quiet bottom of the bath. Then he writes a final note for the blue batch, short and plain. Third piece, slight edge variation. Watched at rinse. The words are not a verdict. They are a small lamp left burning for whoever sees the cloth later. You hear the scratch of his pencil, and it seems softer than the steam has been all day. The rush order has left the room, but its question remains in that narrow line of graphite. Perhaps the finishing room will dry it out of notice. Perhaps daylight will find it. Perhaps the merchant's man will see nothing except dark blue cloth ready soon enough. The vat room cannot answer that now. It can only tell the truth about what happened. You take a wet rag and begin to wipe the inner rim, moving with the grain of the old wood. The rag comes away blue, then paler blue, then grey. Tom rinses the strainer in the wash trough, but he starts to set it down on the stone. You lift one finger. He stops, smiles faintly, and hangs it on the nail, open side outward. Now it can dry. Now the next hand will see whether it is clean. The ash bucket is heavier than it was at dawn. It holds wool mats, sawdust paste, Damp sweepings, color crust, and the little failures that did not become larger ones. You carry it to the yard door with both hands, because even rubbish deserves a steady lift when the floor is wet. Outside, the late afternoon air feels cool against your face. The yard smells of coal smoke, horse sweat, wet stone, and river damp. For a moment, the dye house smell lifts from you, then settles again into your coat. You empty the bucket where such waste is kept, not near the clean passage, and not where a cartwheel will carry it back indoors. When you return, Tom has begun washing the sample cups. He has lined them in order, darkest use to lightest, and he is rinsing the white cup last. That is well done. The white cup should never be asked to prove clean water after sitting in the shadow of a dirty one. He holds it toward the tile, just as you did earlier. A faint blue mark remains near the chipped side. He rinses again without waiting for you to speak. The day is becoming his in small ways. The dyer sees it too, though he says nothing. Praise in a place like this often arrives as being trusted with the next task. He gives Tom the damp slate rag and tells him to wipe only the old marks, not the final ledger figures. Tom goes slowly. Chalk smears under his thumb, and steam has made the board slick. The rush cross fades, but the final batch number remains. You rewrite one note before it can disappear. Third piece, edge watched. The chalk line looks simple, almost too simple for the morning it remembers. But that is the nature of workplace memory. A whole day becomes a few words, a turned handle, a tool on the proper peg. Near vat 4, you notice the lid is not sitting true. One corner has caught on a dried ridge of dye, and the iron handle points slightly toward the wall. It is the same sort of wrongness you found before dawn, only smaller. After a day like this, it would be easy to leave it for morning. The room is cooling. The men are tired. The cloth has gone on, but the rule says handles outward, lids settled, vats readable at a glance. You scrape the ridge away with the dull edge kept for that purpose. Then you tap the lid twice, not because heat remains enough to trouble you, but because habits should not depend on fear. The sound is low. No hiss answers. You set the lid down square and turn the handle outward. Tom watches from the slate board. He says, even at night, you say, especially at night because morning has enough of its own work. That seems to settle in him more deeply than any warning could. The dyer closes his notebook, wraps it in oilcloth, and carries it to the small desk by the inner door. The ledger lies there, larger and heavier, with swollen pages and corners dark from many fingers. He opens it to the day's line. The entries are not grand. Batch number, merchant initials, shade, time entered, correction added, hold noted, rinse extended. Third piece, slight shade question at edge. He dips the pen, careful not to blot, and copies the main notes from his pocketbook. Ink makes the day more permanent than chalk. Still, ink too can be uncertain, if the man writing it hides what the room has shown him. This dyer does not hide it. He writes the shade question in the margin. Small but clear. There it is, not a failure, not a success. A thing to be looked at after drying. The foreman comes once more, quieter now. He says the first two pieces have been accepted forward, and the third is hanging to rest before fuller inspection. The merchant's man has not yet made his judgment. The dyer nods, as if this is no more or less than expected. You see the foreman glance at the margin note. He does not ask to have it softened. That is good. A mill can live with a hard truth written small. It has more trouble with a soft truth, never written at all. The lamps are being lowered now, one by one, not all the way out, not yet, but dimmed enough that the room begins to give back its edges. The vats stand round and dark under their settled lids. The trough water has been run clear, then slowed to a thread. The rollers have been wiped, and the tray beneath them shows only a faint blue stain in the corner. You rinse the long pole and feel along it once more for splinters. The swelling near the middle is still smooth. It goes back on its pegs, thick end left, narrow end right. Tom brings the shorter pole and hesitates, Then he matches its handle to the old mark on the rail. You nod once. No ceremony. Just the room receiving its tools back. The hooks are hung in pairs, points inward, handles outward. The suspect hook remains on the lower shelf for the smith. The buckets are turned mouth down, except the marked one that still needs washing. The white cup hangs by its nail, clean enough to begin tomorrow, with its chip turned where the hand will find it. The floor is not dry. A dye house floor is almost never truly dry, but it is known. The wet places have sawdust, the channels run free. The hose lies coiled against the wall, not across the path. The tin tickets hang separated, faces outward, cords untangled. One ticket still carries a smudge from the morning. You leave it beside the slate because the smudge belongs to the story of the day. Outside, evening has come over Leeds without asking the dye house whether it is ready. The sky beyond the high windows is dull pearl behind smoke. The boiler murmur sinks lower, pipes tick as they cool. Somewhere in the yard, a cart moves off with a slow wooden creak. You wash your hands in water that never quite takes the blue from under your nails. Tom tries the same, rubbing hard at the mark on his forehead when he sees his reflection in the dark pane. It fades, but not entirely. He laughs once, quietly, then stops, as if the room has asked for softness. You take your coat from its peg. It is damp at the cuffs and carries the smell of the day. Steam, wool grease, coal smoke, spent dye, a little river air from the open windows. These smells will go with you into the Leeds evening and perhaps into the room where you sleep. The dyer locks the dye store. The foreman closes the inner door. You take the lantern for the last round, though the room is familiar enough to walk without it. Familiarity is not a reason to stop looking. It is a reason to know what looking is for. Vat 1, settled. Vat 2, drained. Vat 3, lid square. Vat 4, handle outward. Trough clear. Cup clean. Slate legible. Ledger written. The rules that looked fussy in the morning have become something else by night. They are not fuss. They are a way of letting many tired people work near heat, water, colour and weight without turning every moment into a question. They slow the hand where haste would spoil the cloth. They give the foot a path when steam blinds the eye. They make a ticket stay with its peace. They let tomorrow begin without asking yesterday to explain itself all over again. You stand by the door for one breath longer. The room is quieter now, but not empty. It holds the day in stains, damp marks, cooling iron, and the faint blue edge of water near the drain. Somewhere beyond the wall, the third piece is hanging in a finishing room, its slight shade difference resting in the cloth like a question not yet answered. Perhaps in morning light it will be nothing. Perhaps the merchant will see it. For now it is only a line in the ledger, a small honest mark beside a long day's work. You lower the lantern. The stone floor shines in a few places, then darkens as the flame drops. The tools are where they belong, the lids are quiet, the paths are clear, and the vat room waits, cooling slowly, ready to be read again at dawn.